Welcome to 2 Cents Sharp.
We're a couple of trumpet players who sort through the best and worst of the online trumpet community, so you don't have to.
Then we give our 2 cents.
Welcome back, everyone! Today we're returning to Ballads from the Back Row.
These are episodes where we feature some of the funniest stories and posts that the online trumpet community has to offer.
Today we're going to read the first post in an old 5-chapter series of posts by TrumpetHerald user Trumpet for Brains, titled Confessions of a Yamaha Recording Artist. Just a disclaimer, this is entirely fictional and is neither a knock nor an endorsement of any trumpet brand.
It all started simply enough. I played Bach like everyone else. Sure, my third slide fell out of the horn even when I didn't push my valve down, clanking on my bell and falling to the floor in rehearsal, but it happened to everybody once in a while, right? And the intonation? Well, as Tom Stephen once said, intonation is subjective. Missed notes are objective. I never really knew what that meant, but whenever I said it, everybody around me nodded wisely and made understanding grunts of admiration. Besides, Bach was just Bach. Everybody played them. We'd go out together at night after practicing, drinking too much beer and beating up the occasional oboist who crossed our path. Louder and higher was our credo. Then, after finishing school and getting a job in a small orchestra, things started to change. Everybody told the story about Phil Smith coming out from behind the screen in Chicago with a Yamaha B-flat, making everybody on the committee chuckle, and how the next week they drove him down to Elkhart and got him fixed up with a solid C trumpet and 1B mouthpiece anyway. The truth was, though, a lot of the guys started showing up at work with new horns that played really well in tune, but they'd always stick the bells up under their arms when they weren't playing. If you'd ask them if it was a 229 or a 239, they'd get kind of cagey and change the subject. They'd always find a way to avoid letting you try one out, too. So I started checking out the Mount Vernons. Unlacquered, leaky valves, broken braces, it didn't matter. I'd bring them to work and ask the guys how it sounded. I'd get the non-committal grunts from the ones with the shiny, new silver secret box, and I'd watch my bank account deplete with every auction on eBay. Then, after a particularly bitter concert in which I managed to anger all of the woodwinds by playing every important passage with them either too loud or too sharp, and sometimes both at the same time, our second trumpet player took me out for some drinks. After 3 Boilermakers with absolutely no conversation except the animal grunts great trumpet players are somehow able to make when amongst themselves, the second trumpet gathered up some nerve and spoke complete sentences to me for the first time since we had met.
Listen,
he said.
Those horns you've been seeing us with, they ain't Bach's.
While spitting out the last sentence, second trumpet looked around the bar furtively, making sure we were not being overheard.
They just look like Bach's. Yamaha took all the bad notes out of them and engraved their names on the bells. They don't want to come out in the open with it until so many of us are playing them that everybody else will just have to join in. Look, I talked to our cell leader, and even though you only been here a while, he's willing to give you one, too. Only you're not to tell a soul. And when it's time, we'll all come out in the big ads on them buses and such as Yamaha recording artists. Ain't that just great?
So that was that. Overnight, I took possession of my first Bach lookalike, and my career skyrocketed. Auditions were no longer so nerve-wracking. I got knowing looks from the proctors as I'd walk into the room and up to the screen, some of them even mouthing in a sports van sotto voce with both hands at the side of their mouths.
Yamaha! Yamaha!
In a matter of a few years, I had gone from a part-time entry-level regional orchestra to the top 5. Then Yamaha ambushed the unknowing American trumpet player. Overnight, there were pictures of us everywhere, with a single malt scotch in one hand and a Japanese Bach look-alike in the other. Restaurant reservations weren't a problem, and even the conductors would mouth "domo arigato" to us after particularly well-executed passages in concerts. Anybody seen with a Bach case at a stage door was refused entrance, being told politely that the municipal orchestra rehearsed Tuesday and Thursday nights down at the high school. But I couldn't keep away from the internet. Sellers from Hawaii advertised refinished Mount Vernon's beautifully gold-plated with palm trees in the background of the ads and sensual descriptions including exotic ribbon microphones I'd never heard of. I'd buy them sight unseen, even the ones from the Midwest that had been silver-plated with gold trim. I'd buy them just to see what trim was. Heck, I was making a fortune in endorsements alone, right? Then I started to dress up at night after concerts when I was safe, alone at home. I'd play French solo pieces with a bejeweled flumpet, or I'd put on my black leather tails and honk out Bruckner excerpts on my 45-pound Raja. I'd wear racing gear with advertisements from synthetic valve oil companies hand sewn on, and play short ride in a fast machine with my newest Lawler with racing stripes streamlined for less wind drag. But as much as I wanted to, I couldn't do any of this in public. I yearned to play my brushed golden mahogany Harrelson with the onyx finger buttons on the night of Debussy and Ravel, but I was under contract with Yamaha. It was frustrating, but I had everything under control. As long as I had these little fantasy excursions alone, nobody would find out. Who was I harming, right? Then, one night, dressed as Dame Edith and practicing the heart part of Wagner's Fire Magic and the Gotterdammerung on my Romeo Adachi Star Wars Model C, there was an announcement over public address systems from roaming automobiles driving around in the streets.
There has been a gas leak. Please leave your homes for the next public building immediately. Do not run, but proceed in a cautious manner. Please leave your homes now.
When I slowly cracked my door open, I saw pandemonium in the streets. People running every which way, carrying bedrolls, mix masters, and the last 10 years of their income tax filings. There was no time to lose. I flung myself out the door, headed for Orchestra Hall in my rhinestone-studded horn rims and sensible shoes, Dame Edith be darned. 2 blocks away from the hall, I ran straight into Second Trumpet, dressed as Mata Hari with a titanium piranha in his hands. As he looked sheepishly in my direction, we noticed a utility trumpet racing down a side street, dressed as a cleaning woman with a stock Bach 229 in his hand.
Slummin' as usual,
muttered Second Trumpet.
But they'll catch us all just the same.
What are you talking about? I asked, just as a small Asian man in a black leather military-type uniform with the letters YY and a lightning motive on his epaulettes came up to us and demanded our endorsement cards.
Please return home at once,
he said.
This has been a test, nothing more. Your cell leader will be in touch with you directly.
Upon returning home, I realized that although everything seemed as I left it, all of my covertly purchased trumpets were gone. No overt threats, just the newest Chicago and New York models on beautifully handcrafted wooden trumpet stands in my practice room. Pretty subtle, but I got the message. As I sit here cowering behind my PC, I can't help but think about the good old days when things were simple and everybody knew the rules. It was Bach or bust. What now? God, what now? Signed, X.
Name removed to protect the identity of the artist.
Now we're going to change gears and switch over to something we call the Emerging Leaders Spotlight.
This is a segment where we feature trumpet players in the dawn of their careers who are not only talented musicians, but a force for good in the trumpet community.
This segment is inspired by the late Ryan Anthony, who championed the idea that as musicians, we should also be positive and welcoming people. The musicians we feature are leaders in this initiative, and we are excited to see what they will continue to do for the music and trumpet communities in the future.
Today's emerging leader is Yuval Tessman-Bar-On. Yuval is entering her 4th year of undergraduate studies at McGill University's Schulich School of Music, pursuing a double major in trumpet performance and music history. She has experience performing in symphony and chamber orchestras, jazz ensembles, marching bands, and contemporary ensembles. Yuval has recently performed as a substitute trumpet player in Symphoria, formerly known as Syracuse Symphony Orchestra. Yuval is passionate about connecting issues of social justice and education to her musical endeavors. She is the founder of the Future in Music program, a mentorship program that is focused on promoting access to high-quality education to brass players who are members of underrepresented groups or may not have such access. Yuval also volunteers with the International Women's Brass Conference, working on the social media committee and doing historical research for the Mentor Monday series. In her musicological work, Yuval's research is primarily focused on themes of social justice in music, both in popular music and in brass and orchestral music. Aside from music, Yuval loves to rock climb, read, hike, run, weight lift, travel, ride horses, and volunteer with political campaigns.
Why I started playing trumpet is honestly a pretty good story. So my elementary school did the instruments presentation in 5th grade, like most do, and I saw all the band instruments and I saw that the trumpet had quote unquote 3 buttons, and somehow I figured that this must mean that it only has 3 different notes. I thought this must make trumpet the easiest instrument, and I didn't want to commit much time, so I went for that one. I was really inspired by my band teachers in middle and high school to go into music. In my last year of high school, I started realizing more and more that I wanted to perform. I think a lot of this was because of my private trumpet teacher during that year. And I also realized more in university that I want to also be a professor of music. And I think this was really influenced by my parents, both of whom are professors. So I grew up around academia and research, and when you're a kid, of course, you think what your parents do is boring. But by the time I was in university, I realized that I definitely want research, particularly in musicology, to be a big part of my life in addition to performing. The trumpet community has to make the changes that the world in general has to make. It's not this, different niche spot. The world is making a lot of changes in a really good way, and the trumpet community needs to do the same thing. In my approach to being a leader in the trumpet community, I try to balance both being a student and trying to lead as I'm learning. I don't think it's necessary to wait until you're quote-unquote fully established as a trumpet performer or as a teacher to start working toward other goals of leading the way for others. I'm always aiming to be lifting as we climb. Which I know is a quote from Mary Church Terrell. And right now, I'm a student myself, and I have so much to learn. So there are a lot of contexts in which I'm being mentored.
That's all for today. Many thanks to Yuval for her time and recordings. You can find her on Instagram at yuval.trumpet, or visit her website at yuvaltessman-bar-on.weebly.com. The intro music is an excerpt of Charlier's Etude Transcendante No. 30, and the emerging leaders music is Charlier's Etude Transcendante No. 6. The music and sound effects for the story are provided royalty-free courtesy of mixkit.co. Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. And remember, always play 2 cents sharp.